As legislators, when we come to debate this issue of all issues, I think an obvious but important starting point when we're going to discuss the right of we as legislators to decide who should and who shouldn't be aborted, it's important just to remind ourselves that we are all here because we were not aborted. No one chose to abort any of us. That, I think, is a sobering starting point, particularly for those who are so willing to defend and support abortion. They would do unto others what wasn't done to them. Of course, when we talk about abortion, we are talking about the deliberate, calculated act of snuffing out human life. There's nothing accidental about it. Yes, in pregnancies, sadly, miscarriages occur, still deaths occur. But abortion is so different. It is the deliberate killing of the babe in the womb. However you dress it up, that is what it is. And to me, it is quite shocking that today, from some, that the saving of even one life of a Downs baby could provoke such opposition. And tonight, this Assembly and this vote will decide whether it's on the side of life or on the side of death. It will decide, and this, I think, is the nub of the matter. It will decide if disability justifies death. It will decide if we, as legislators, are going to validate by the state disability justifying death. That's how chilling and how awful the proposition is, that if someone is in the womb, which should really be the safest place for any unborn, and they are detected of having a serious impairment, then the state can validate their death. This House will decide tonight if what some see as imperfection offends to the extent that we warrant the killing. I heard talk in this debate today about ensuring, heard Ms McLaughlin talking about ensuring that we have a progressive, inclusive society. It's neither progressive nor inclusive for the aborted, for the unborn, whose only crime under this limb of the legislation is that they're not as others. Really? Is that what we as legislators think we should be doing? Should we not be in the space of being the voice for the voiceless? Those who cannot speak, but those whom we would authorise the killing of. Should we not pause and think as legislators of being the voice of the voiceless? I would have thought we should. And what are we talking about? Well, we all had a briefing from the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. They give us a definition in that briefing of severe impairment. This is what that briefing said. Severe impairments are wide-ranging, can include chromosomal anomalies, congenital anomalies, and anomalies related to the nervous system. Now go and look up any respectable medical textbook for congenital disorders, and you will find this list. Common congenital disorders include the following: cleft lip and cleft palate, cerebral palsy, Fragile X syndrome, Down syndrome, spina bifida, cystic fibrosis, heart conditions. This legislation that the member is seeking to amend admits for abortion for those suffering congenital anomalies. I've listed them. That's what we're talking about. And when you then go to the World Health Organization, you will discover that under a section called Treatment and Care, that many structural congenital anomalies can be corrected with paediatric surgery, and early treatment can be administered to children with functional problems. But it seems, don't worry about that, just abort them. How callous is that? If we are a caring society, why do we not care for the those unborn with congenital anomalies? Why do we not care about them? I say most forcefully to this House, we should, and shame on us if we don't. And yet those who support abortion want the right to terminate, what an ugly word, to terminate such children. And without a blush of embarrassment, they do it in the name of human rights. What a perversion. I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, what offends me. The invocation of human rights to justify the deliberate killing of human beings. That's the greatest offence. And thus I have to say, what a charter for death and destruction, the very antithesis of human rights, is the CEDAW report. And it's that what we're absurdly told we're tied to by legislation. I say to this House, for all of us, we have a choice to make. Are we on the side of the voiceless, the unborn, those that some would call imperfect? Or are we on the ruthless side of terminating them? Now, this legislation, which brought in abortion, of course, is forever infamously linked to the restoration of these institutions. The clues in the title: the Northern Ireland Executive Formation, etc. Act 2020. And whether sweeping through same-sex marriage and abortion in such legislation suited some whose greater priority was a return to office, that remains a matter for valid speculation. But the bounden duty on us is, if we can roll back some of that, then we most assuredly should. And here we are talking about a modest, a very modest step to deal with one specific and discrete aspect of the abomination of abortion. Just one aspect. And yet it infuriates those who defend and promote abortion, that this House would dare to even think of protecting Down syndrome babies or those with other classifications as serious impairments. And Mr. Speaker, as for Sinn Féin in this debate, they told us this debate was a distraction from the DUP doing this or that or something else. Yes, it was a distraction. Their contributions. A distraction from the fact that they were the very people who on the 2nd of June last year proposed the very premise of this bill. It was Ms Sheeran, no less, who proposed the amendment in this House. Yes?
Thank the member for giving way and raising this important point, but I think it is worth noting that we put on record Ms Sheeran's comments that day, where she said, and I quote, "To serve disabled people properly, we need to build infrastructure that is totally accessible. We need to have inclusivity to properly service Section 75 obligations across all public sector bodies, and to raise awareness of the issues that face less able people in their daily lives. Sinn Féin does not believe that a non-fatal fetal abnormality is an appropriate criterion for an abortion."
But here, it's word for word what Sinn Féin said through Ms Sheeran in proposing their amendment. And of course, in the Republic of Ireland, to which they would wish to join us all, this is exactly the legislation they have. And yet today, they are unwilling to support the very thing they called for in this House, what, 9 months ago? The very thing they voted for in the Republic of Ireland. But today, it's a different tune. We had Miss O'Neill coming in and talking to us about injustice and cruelty, but not a thought of the injustice and the cruelty to the unborn who are to be terminated. Not a thought of it. And so I do say that not for the first time in this House, Sinn Féin stand exposed in their rank hypocrisy on this issue. The very people who proposed the very wording in their amendment that lays the basis for this bill are today the people who say, "Oh no, we mustn't do it." And they find all sorts of excuses, none of which are credible. I've never heard such porous excuses in all my life for not standing up for what you told us you believed in 9 months ago. Which was the real Sinn Féin? Maybe I better not know the answer to that question. Might be even more disturbing. So here we are today with a most modest proposal. And of course, I say to this House, unlike the member who seeks to intervene, who refused mine, I will.
Unlike the member, I didn't quote you, Mr. Allister, and I'm going to intervene because you're all quoting me. Would the members who make reference to things that I said in this House in June of last year acknowledge that the British Secretary of State has already outlined that any decision that this House takes that is not in line with the recommendations of the CEDAW report will be overturned in the way that they legislated for this issue, for this jurisdiction in the first place? And therefore, the conversation that we are having is totally without point, because it will not change anything. Therefore, the rationale for our decision to abstain. Gormagat.
2 points about that, if I might, Mr. Speaker. Of course, the legislation had already been passed last June, whenever the member proposed her opposition to this tenant. So it is the member who has shifted her ground, not anyone else. And isn't it intriguing that when it suits, the ally of the Secretary of State is Sinn Féin? It is Sinn Féin who are saying to this House, we have to accept British rule. We have to accept what the Secretary of State has said on this issue. And of course, they also, in doing that, seem to have forgotten that abortion is in fact a devolved matter. Aren't they the great champions of wanting to extend the realms of devolution? My goodness, they even want to put their hands in our pockets through taxation under devolution. But here, when it comes to this devolved issue of abortion, oh no, we will kowtow to those who have put this upon us. Is that the best that Sinn Féin can do? Yes, I'll give way.
For giving way. You'll not be surprised that the SDLP has a fairly steadfast view of this particular British Secretary of State. We wouldn't trust him as far as we could throw him. But will the member also recall that whenever the Northern Ireland Executive Formation Act in 2019 was going through the Westminster Parliament, it was acknowledged by no less a person than Viscount Younger of Lecky, who, I quote, said, "As abortion remains a devolved issue, the Assembly is now able to legislate or indeed amend the regulations should it so wish."
Sorry, Mr. Allister, we're in danger of straying way too far and for too long off the subject of this bill. So I invite you to go back to the purpose of the bill. That should not be so difficult.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, this Assembly today is being invited to do the very thing that the government said it could do in terms of amending the legislation on abortion. And that seems to me to be what this bill before the House is seeking to do. I, of course, believe we need to go further. 79% of the people who responded to the government's proposals expect us to go further, because they rejected those proposals. And I regret, I have to say this to the member, that the long title of this bill probably impedes much by way of amendment to make a real assault on the abortion trade. But at least it's a start. And I hope no one who brings it or supports it sees it as an end, rather as a beginning. For so long as babes in the womb can be summarily killed by the gruesome practice of abortion, then we would be legislators failing the unborn. And I don't want to be in that category. Thank you.